I never imagined that my diligent record-keeping would cause me to uncover a criminal conspiracy in my own backyard. But that is precisely what occurred last summer. My name is Michael, and I have resided in Oak Ridge Estates for 5 years now. It is a pleasant enough suburban complex with tidy common grounds, a community pool, and alas, a homeowners association, controlled by the most exasperating woman I have ever had the misfortune of meeting, Karen Wilkins, since I arrived. Karen told me that she was superior to me to herself, the unofficial queen of our subdivision as HOA president. She used her clipboard and rulebook as weapons, taking measurements with a ruler and handing out violation notices. If your mailbox was slightly off, ask you at monthly meetings, she droned on about community standards, while shooting disapproving glances at anyone who had the temerity to question her authority as your HOA president. "It's my responsibility to keep property values high," she'd say, with that condescending smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I'm only doing what's best for the best of all." But we knew the truth. Karen just loved the power trip. I normally kept a low profile until last April when I chose to paint my front door a deep navy blue. I read the bylaws. Carefully neutrally colored doors were specifically permitted, and a couple of other houses had doors the same color. I even completed the proper paperwork and waited 2 weeks as stipulated with no response, which by the bylaws constituted automatic approval. The paint was barely dry before my doorbell rang. There was Karen in her signature beige pantsuit, oversized sunglasses on her head, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Excuse me, Michael, but that door color has been accepted by the architecture committee," she replied, tightly smiling. I informed her politely that I'd submitted the paperwork and received tacit acceptance by default of silence by Section 7.3 of the bylaws. I went so far as to offer her evidence of presenting her with my copy of the submission, dated with open showing. "Well, I never saw any paperwork," she breathed an overexcited gulp. "You will have to paint it now, or else we'd get fined $50 every day." She spoke to me in that special voice she reserved for the absolutely certain. Instead of trying to argue with me further, I shook my head and said, "I'll look into it." It wasn't the first time I'd gone rodeo on Karen, and I knew well enough to go after her head on. Instead, I sent her the HOA treasurer, Dan, for confirmation of my report. Dan, he quickly answered in assurance that my plea had indeed been received. And marked armed with such evidence, I determined that the issue was more than 3 days. Then, 3 days after this, I received a notice of infraction taped on my navy blue grate front door and a fine of $150. The notice reads that I never submitted records and was in willful disobedience of HOA rules. More so, it told me I had an outstanding balance of $450 in unpaid quarterly dues, which was entirely false. I had bank statements to confirm that all payments had been made on time. That's when it struck me something was amiss. Karen wasn't being her nasty self. She was actually doctoring accounts. I wrote a letter of denial for both accusations, enclosing copies of my architectural request, acknowledgement, and bank statements, to prove my dues payments had been made. I sent copies to all concerned board member, neither Karen. The next day, my phone beeped with a call from Karen. "How could you go behind my back to the board?" she thundered. "Not even saying hello. This is absolutely unprofessional and compromises my authority." "I'm just submitting paperwork to resolve what must be a misunderstanding," I said, mildly, which seemed only to enrage her further. "There's no misunderstanding. Our books show clearly that you're in arrears and now you're attempting to cause trouble because you are being held for rule breaking." She answered, "The board has voted to place a lien on your house. If you don't pay the whole balance by the last day of the month, a lien for false infractions and charges I had already paid." This had gone too far. "Karen, I have records of payments. If you are considering something else on your books, perhaps we should have an independent audit of the HOA books," I suggested tactfully. There was a silence at the other end of the phone that will not be required. She finally answered, her voice now less confident. "I'll look again at the records. But don't think this gets you off the hook for that unauthorized door color." My suspicions now thoroughly aroused, I began discussing with neighbors. To my surprise, some had experienced similar occurrences. Odd late charges, lost payment records, and threats of liens, all from Karen, directly. All without records proper, from the treasurer. One of neighbors, Elaine, had paid actually $900 more because Karen had spoken her into thinking she owed her dues, even though she had automatic bank payments set up. I decided to play first. I asked for copies of all financial records for the past 3 years by a formal written request, which the HOA legally had to provide Karen stalling, with the argument that the records were in the process of being sorted out and wouldn't be prepared for a few weeks. Sometime soon, I called our bank, specifically requesting statements of all the checks that I had written to the HOA, which were deposited. What I discovered was appalling. While my checks were being cashed, several of them appeared to have been deposited into a different account than the one we were informed about officially on our payment slips. I brought this to the attention of Dan, the treasurer, who seemed to be distraught and bewildered. I only account for what gets deposited into our master account. He admitted Karen personally handles some of the deposits, but she always gives me the deposit slips. I had no idea there could be a second account together. We pulled all the financial records Dan had access to and balanced them against what several homeowners were able to verify. They'd paid, the discrepancies were sizable. Nearly $35,000 appeared to be missing over the past 2 years. Money that had been collected but never made it into the official books. With this evidence in hand, the vice president called an emergency board meeting, specifically excluding Karen. The evidence was overwhelming. Karen had been running a sophisticated scam, generating fake late notices, extorting homeowners into paying double dues, and depositing checks into an alternate account. Only she controlled the board, voted unanimously to remove Karen from office, and to report the incident to the police. They also hired a forensic accountant to follow all of the missing money, just in case they locked up all the HOA accounts and replaced the signatories. Karen, of course, didn't let it lie quietly when she was served notice of her termination. She came to my doorstep again this time, with mascara streaming down in black rivulets. "How could you do that to me?" She was yelling loudly enough for the whole neighborhood here. "I've devoted my life to this, people. You've destroyed everything." I stood in my doorway, my navy blue doorway, and answered peacefully. The board made their decision based on evidence. Karen, this isn't about evidence. Evidence. What evidence? Those documents were in shambles. When I came into it, I was just attempting to get things correct. She screamed, her anguish immediately falling into anger. "The police can take care of it," I said, closing the door as she launched her tie attack on my front porch. 2 days hence, we all stood and watched in our windows as Karen was escorted away from her house in handcuffs, sobbing theatrically as the officers usher her into the back of a police cruiser. The charges were severe: embezzlement fraud, tampering with financial records, and theft by deception. The investigation revealed she'd embezzled over $73,000 from our HOA over 4 years, using the money to pay for vacations, and a shopping habit her realtor commissions wouldn't cover at her sentencing. Hearing 6 months post-arrest. I sat in court and watched the judge impose her sentence: 3 years in state prison restitution for every penny stolen, and a $25,000 fine. Karen's thick, expertly styled hair clung limp to her surprised face as the reality of her situation finally hit her. "But I was only borrowing it," she panted as the bailiff sang her out to send her away to jail. "I was going to pay it all back." Her bubbly tear stained through the court as she was escorted away, still not understanding quite yet how her game playing and financial manipulation had caused such ghastly results. And as for my navy blue door, well, it's still in place, a daily reminder that sometimes justice does indeed